Welcome to Twin Signals, Metrics at Work, with Elizabeth P. Morgan. Because metrics only matter when everyone agrees on what they mean.
In this episode of Twin Signals, Metrics at Work, I speak with Henriette Schinn, VP of Enterprise and Mid-Market Sales at Capmo, a fast-growing B2B SaaS company in the construction space. Henry started out as a qualitative researcher before moving into SaaS, which gave her a lasting conviction that numbers without context are just noise. As companies scale, she sees one of the biggest challenges in aligning what metrics actually mean across teams, and how even something as simple as annual recurring revenue can be interpreted differently across sales, success, and finance. Center stage is Henry's key metric, sales accepted opportunity conversion, SAO conversion, and what it really reveals about pipeline quality and health. Looking ahead, Henry argues that metrics need to be enriched with context, not just showing what has changed, but why, and what decisions that should inform. That, she suggests, is the real challenge companies face today. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Metrics at Work. It's my pleasure to be talking with Henriette Schinn, the marvelous Henry Schinn, who heads up enterprise and mid-market sales at Capmo. Henry and I started working together some years ago in the enterprise software market. And I just remember that every single time I went to a meeting with Henry, she would pull out a biro and click a pen, and the metrics would start and the meeting would start. And it was always just the snappiest way to get focused on the business at hand. Henry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Elizabeth. Very, very happy to be on this podcast. Of course, I have my pen with me, ready to start if you like.
Fantastic. So, Henry, maybe before we get to the business of metrics, you really started in qualitative research and then moved into SaaS and, running a numbers machine. What was the turning point for you with metrics? When did metrics start to count for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, before I entered the interesting journey of SaaS, I was a qualitative researcher, definitely. So the why was driving my thinking and my focus. But then joining SaaS and having to build scalable processes. I mean, of course, you have to look into metrics and you have to understand your data to manage your business. It was not so easy, to be fair, because quantitative data is good, but it lacks a context. So I really, really always was going back to qualitative interpretation and was really missing this part of it. Obviously, totally acknowledging how important quantitative data is when you want to manage a business.
Yeah, and I guess in those days too, quantitative data wasn't so easy to find at first, right? We had spreadsheets and Splunk sheets and, good old-fashioned manual surveys for CSAT and MPS. So it was really bringing a lot of stuff together to get an
Def-
overview and start
def-
exploring the why.
Definitely difficult. And to be honest, the why typically was recency bias, a conversation one just had, in best case, a qualitative survey, but most likely an opinion that added up to the quantitative data.
Yeah, so context is king, and here we are. Context is still king, right? Always,
Absolutely.
always. So maybe, Henry, just for our people today, can you tell us a little bit about Capmo, like the where you are in your journey, the businesses you sell to? Just give us an overview of Capmo.
Absolutely. Capmo is a B2B SaaS company in the construction and project management space. We sell to construction leads, to project leads who have to manage very complex, very long-lasting projects where software only matters if it creates operational value in the end.
And the sales organization?
Our sales organization is working closely together across BDR, account executives, and customer success. Why is closely so important? Most risks lie between these functions, right? You can manage each function as good as you like, but we try to bring them as close together to have not just a consistent customer journey, but also to reduce the friction at the handover places, because there's where the risk lies.
So what kinds of metrics and how are you working with metrics day to day across those organizations?
Yeah. At our stage as a company, metrics shape how we operate every day, not because we lack the data, because aligning on them is so difficult today, right? I mean, we have, as we grow as a company, more and more dashboards, more and more data, but it's really difficult to align those teams as we scale, I would say.
And I mean, we use alignment, right? It's this marvelous word that papers over a lot of things. So what is the alignment challenge? Why is it such a challenge to achieve that common meaning?
I think as companies scale, more and more teams start relying on the same metric. So they look at the same dashboard, they take away the same number, but they use it for different decisions. And the number itself lacks the meaning. The meaning changes depending on what you try to optimize on. And if all different teams look at this number to optimize in their isolated way, they take away totally different business decisions from that. And that makes it so difficult. Um, Dashboards become more sophisticated, data become more easy to access, but the interpretation becomes fragmented. So the real challenge isn't having the data. That's easier when you grow as a company. It's really making sure everyone has the same understanding of one and the same metric. So what it actually means, what it actually guides you.
Mm.
Otherwise, you're optimizing in different direction. And in worst case, you break the flow and you don't make it better.
It's my pleasure to share that Twin Signals Metrics at Work is sponsored by HelloTwin.ai, the semantic operating system for SMBs. Hello Twin. Stop managing agents. Start managing outcomes. Launching June 24, 2026. And so, as I recall, pretty much all of your organization is on HubSpot, looking at HubSpot dashboards, right? And then you have, so you've got gazillions of HubSpot widgets, or what? How's that looking? And you have some data support for those dashboards too?
Yes, we have a wonderful revenue operations team that creates all these dashboards in HubSpot. You're right, the whole organization is on HubSpot. But truth being told, every team has more or less a team space. So there's a sales dashboard space, there is a customer success dashboard space, there's a BDR dashboard space. And that already shows a bit the difficulty there, right? Because everyone has revenue operations built their individual spaces with sometimes the same metrics, and everyone uses it in a different way. That makes it difficult. Yes, do we have an overarching dashboard? For sure, but in the day to day you sit in your world, that makes it very difficult to come to joint conclusions about what's happening there.
Yeah. And just maybe one more point to the dashboards before we go into the meaning behind the big metrics, right? Do you find that the dashboards answer all your questions?
Jein, I would say in German. Funny enough, just recently we had our quarterly board meeting, and yet again we looked at our dashboards, and yes, they are extremely helpful, creating transparency. They give a shared view of what's going or what's happening in the business, but they don't really answer the questions on their own. Most of the time, they tell you what's happening, but they really don't tell you why.
Mm,
So the value comes from the conversations. The value comes from metrics starting a discussion and not stopping a discussion. So they give you good insights, but they don't answer your questions. No.
yeah. So which metrics do you personally depend on most?
MVP sales is ARR. I mean, that's the most important metric at the end of the day. That's what's ultimately counting as a sales organization. Um, but there already the interpretation starts, right? I mean, take this very easy metric, ARR, and then you ask a few different functions in your company, you get different answers. What is it? Is it signed ARR? Is it booked? Are you actually talking ACV, TCV? What actually is it, right? I mean, just the
Yeah.
simple metric ARR can create different answers or understanding depending on whom you ask. A finance person, a salesperson, revenue operations person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that even the most simple things are, but I like your point that it's really through the lens of the decision that needs to be taken. You know,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
meaning is dependent on the decision context as well.
Yeah.
And for you beyond, above? the baseline of ARR? What is the key metric for you?
I think it is really the SAO to closed one conversion. So SAO defines sales exit opportunity when a deal enters the sales pipeline. And I look a lot at the conversions from deals entering the pipeline to closed one because it gives you clearly an answer whether we are qualifying right or if we are simply pushing deals into the funnel. So it tells me how healthy the business is that I'm doing. So once we had a situation where our pipeline volume looked very healthy, but
Mm,
looking closely at it, we knew it's not. So our hypothesis, so the conversion rates were not good, even though the pipeline volume was great. So first hypothesis was that this is a timing issue, that's an execution issue. If we simply make the deal cycles longer, if we involve more stakeholders or get more senior attention on that, we could solve this disconnect between pipeline volume and too low of a
mm,
conversion there. But once we added context, it became clear that many of these opportunities entering the pipeline were never truly qualified. The problem was
mm.
not at the end of the conversion, but it was at the beginning of the pipeline. So we were entering deals too early, overestimating ICP fit in some cases, and mistaking interest for real buying readiness. So that insight led us to redesign our first qualification call, tighten collaboration between BDR and account executive to really have the same understanding of what deals are allowed to enter the pipeline. And we were much, much stricter with criterias before deals were allowed to move forward.
So it's your North Star, sales accepted
Yes.
opportunity conversions.
So it is sales accepted opportunity to closed one conversion. So if you like, it's a win rate.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a win rate, and it's really the percentage of deals making it through the full funnel. So if 100% enter on and no, if 100 deals enter, 30 close one, 30%
And what's a
win
good
rate,
number for you? What's a good benchmark for you with conversion?
30%.
Yeah. Actually, I saw
That's
Jason
best in
Lemkin say,
class.
yeah, Jason Lemkin saying, if it's more than that, maybe your deal values are too low. So you
Yeah,
want
that's
to,
true.
you,
That is,
oh, yeah.
want to get the ASPs higher there, definitely.
Okay. So then, what are the metrics you tend to ignore? Like, as you say, there's a lot of noise, right? So
Yeah.
if your eye, of course, is on ARR and then on sales accepted opportunity conversions for, real deal pipeline,
Yes.
then
Yeah.
what are you ignoring?
Yeah. What I consciously discount are pure activity metrics. Or
Hmm.
calls, meetings, all that stuff you typically feel the urge to track to manage your team. Um, why? Because they can look productive, but they don't tell you whether you're actually building durable revenue. Yeah. So pipeline creates optimism, activity creates optimism, but conversion, that is what creates accountability. So I'm not the manager sitting there. You only had 35 activities today. We said 40. What's wrong, dude? Yeah. So that's not me.
No, it's true that, I mean, there used to be, I guess, before we understood intent and being in market and so on, so much of sales leadership was about pipeline for optimism and energy, right? And it was
Yes.
like this, if you could control this enthusiasm at the top of the funnel, it would naturally
Hmm.
trickle through. But I love this
Yes.
idea that pipeline is optimism, conversion is accountability. Cool. Um, we talked about the kind of insights that you got from sales accepted opportunity conversions. What
Hmm.
about a time when what you saw in the numbers was conflicting with what you believed was happening? So where have you been deceived by metrics, if you like?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a defining moment for us was around the ICP, so the ideal customer profile. For a long time, the internal narrative at Capmo was that we are winning deals across all the different industries in the
Mm,
construction world and all the different segments.
mm,
So we interpreted that as proof that our market is broad and demand is strong. Pipeline volume supported that belief. So we saw all these indications, early stage metrics looked healthy, deals were progressing nicely, and there was a strong sense of momentum. But when we started looking deeper at these metrics, the picture changed. So the ZAO 2 plus 1 conversion, so the win rates, dropped sharply outside our ICP. So sales cycles much longer than in the ICP. And looking even further down the funnel, implementation effort increased heavily outside the ICP, and expansion potential dropped. Churn rates increased. So just looking at the early funnel was giving us a good feeling about what we could do. But then looking down the customer journey, we had to realize that the assumption was broken down that pipeline volume equals market fit. You have to look deeper into the cycle.
So it's about stopping, not looking at metrics in isolation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And just to recap, is connecting the sales KPIs like conversion and deal duration with customer success metrics like time to value, adoption, expansion, and that
Exactly.
more cohesive view.
That was essential to understand how healthy our business actually is. Yeah, and not have a zombie revenue lying around that creates a problem later on. Yeah, so we essentially actually had to follow data across the entire customer lifecycle. So instead of stopping our analysis at the closed one, we looked at how those same accounts performed during onboarding, early adoption. We had to connect the sales starter with the metrics, as you said, time to value, product users, expansions. And then we got the true picture of where a healthy business is and where we actually should focus on.
I have to say, Henry, do you think that your history in customer success and then moving to enterprise sales brought a more holistic view of this pipeline for you? Do you think you have an advantage from coming into enterprise sales from that background?
I would say so for sure. Yeah, and I'm always inclined to rather look at the long-term metrics and KPIs. So even today, for me, NRR and expansion potential is sometimes even more important than the quick ARR closes at the beginning of a customer relationship, because again, you cannot build a healthy business if it's just about new booked ARR. Yeah, that can look for a quarter, in another quarter, in another quarter, but latest 12 months down the road, the churn numbers will tell you that you did the wrong thing. So yes, for sure.
Some a lot of talk about the trend to, or not the trend, the need to bring the success organization into the sales organization to accommodate it, who owns the numbers. And I think you're a walking, talking poster of the motivation for that and the results of doing it. Maybe just thinking about all the people that you're working with, how do the people in your sales organization react to these metrics and dashboards?
It's a good question. So I think I see typically three different reactions, so three different kind of people. Some simply treat metrics as a single source of truth. So without questioning, without context, if a number is good, reality is good. Others are just using selective numbers to support their opinion. Also dangerous, yeah, if you just pick your numbers and let them tell the stories you want to tell anyways. And then some, and I think that's the majority, they rather shy away from metrics altogether. They feel exposed, they feel judged by it. So I think the bigger part in the sales organization tries not to even look at it. To yeah, I
Unless
mean
the
all
numbers are
three.
good. Unless the metrics are
Unless the
good.
numbers are good, of course. And I guess all three reactions are totally human, right? Then they three become problematic when metrics are detached from the meaning. And yeah, psychological safety in the end. That's
So maybe
typically it
just
says.
circling back to the first one, and we come to psychological
Yeah.
safety. And I've got to say, I'm still reeling from zombie revenue. Did you say zombie sales? So there are a few things to unpack before you leave today. But the first thing you said is that one kind of reaction you have is to look at metrics as a single source of truth without questioning context. So what do you mean there? Because one would think a single source of truth is good, right? So could you give me an example of what you mean there?
Depends. So you were right to say that, especially when the numbers look good, that's what people tend to. So if an account executive looks at his or her own conversion rates, and I say 30% is great, and this person has 30% or beyond, they just take it and say, I'm doing great sales.
Hmm.
but they might not realize that they're doing cherry picking when it comes to pipeline acceptance, to deals going into the pipeline. So maybe they're actually creating a problem earlier on because they only pick the deals that they know close. So just looking at the great conversion number might not naturally or necessarily translate in an AE doing a perfect job. Maybe their
Yeah.
qualification is not good enough. Maybe their pain discovery is not deep enough. Otherwise, they could also let other deals into the pipeline, as one
And
example.
and that's that whole thing you were talking about earlier about, the danger of looking at a metric in isolation, right? So I guess
Yes.
the
Yeah.
classic
Yeah.
disconnect between people like me in marketing and people like you in sales is that we say, "Whoa, look at all these beautiful
Yes.
leads that I gave you, and the numbers on the leads are fantastic, but the
Yes.
context for how they're landing on the other side maybe isn't so sure." And then
Absolutely.
and then I think we're all familiar with well, maybe not all of us, but I've certainly been tempted several times to use metrics selectively to support an opinion. But what about this idea of psychological safety? You said that you feel that some people, many people, shy away from metrics because they feel judged by them. And my question to you would be, how do you overcome that with your team? How do you make people feel comfortable with metrics?
Yeah. I think for me, it starts with anchoring metrics to questions rather
Hmm.
than targets.
Hmm.
A number should start a conversation and not end it. It should not be a proof of why you're good or not good. It should start a discussion around how do we progress together as a team. So we also try to separate learnings from accountability. So in team meetings, in team discussions, it's about patterns and individual performance that has no place in a team meeting. That's an individual discussion. And we always try to trace metrics back to real outcomes, I would say. So customer adoption, deal success, expansion. When people understand what a number actually represents, then the conversation becomes much healthier. So again, if you talk about metrics in context and not just the conversion, that may or may look good.
So metrics is the trigger for questions.
Hmm.
Metrics is a source of metrics as they relate to outcomes, and metrics as they um, create and define patterns.
Yeah, I could agree to that. Yes.
And then maybe just if you could wish that everyone in your sales organization or in your GTM organization understood a metric more deeply, what would that metric be? What is the metric that people most misunderstand in your view?
I mean, specifically thinking about the account executives, I think is a difference between stage movement and real deal progress. I think the most common misperception is that a deal hasn't progressed just because it moved forward in the CRM. But that's very common behavior, right? They just change the deal stage to the next progress, and then they feel good about their forecast. But that's not what shows progression. So progression only happens when a meaningful uncertainty has been resolved,
Mhm.
buying process clarity, rollout commitment, etc. So if I could work with, or if I could wish for an AE to understand that part and not just look at deal stages, that would already change a lot, I would say. Another one would be SAO, so sales accept opportunity quality. So not every opportunity, just because you have the label of SAO
Mm.
in your CRM i- and it looks promising, but it doesn't deserve further forecast or pursue. So that's also one where I would say that's a metric, or that's an yeah, a definition account executives should look more closer. Yeah. So what
Mm.
it's for me, it should always come down to evidence of a real buying process. Interest alone isn't enough. We should look for clearly articulated problems and the
Yep.
impact of that. So pain and relevance in that one, and the right stakeholders need to be involved, and they should articulate some kind of interest in the real evaluation process.
No.
So when those
So,
elements are part of it, good. SAO, if not, it's just not reality. It's just not true.
mm. How about your experience these last quarters, months, weeks with AI and metrics in sales? What have you experienced there, Henry?
Yeah. I mean, AI is super helpful in day to day. I mean, I don't think any one of us is not using AI several times a day. But when it comes to numbers, it's very insufficient, I would say. So AI is very good at identifying patterns. But when it comes to real context and to understanding, it's often limited. So many CRM tools today, including HubSpot and other established tools,
Mm.
they provide AI interpretation for your metrics, but without context around the company, around the stage, the deal maturity, organizational intent. It just it's hallucinating. So these insights are not helpful. So it's not so much that the risk is a wrong number. I'm pretty sure that AI can find the right number today, but it's really the confident conclusion that is missing. So what's the interpretation
Mm.
of that number? And that's why
Mm.
I'm not trusting AI today necessarily when it comes to numbers.
And you said the pattern recognition is good. Is this like picking up patterns and themes in conversation intelligence, or where are
Yeah.
you doing the pattern intelligence?
Yeah, it's mainly to conversation or anything that's related to text, basically. That's where it's good
Mm.
at summarizing patterns, etc. But with numbers, would not bet my money on that yet.
And looking ahead, what are the sales metrics you think that are going to matter most?
Mm, I don't think it's more metrics or more dashboards. I mean, the dashboards we have are already so sophisticated, and I don't think we have to invent different metrics after centuries of SaaS business, right? But the contextual intelligence that
Mm.
that needs to go in that. So for me, what is that? Metrics are connected to decisions. It's not just about having more dashboards. It's about understanding which numbers actually matter in a given situation. Yeah. So what it actually represents and what actions it should trigger. That's how I would envision that. That includes shared definition across a company so that all this misalignment stops, clear governance, otherwise it goes sideways, and ability to trace metrics back to real outcomes in the business.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know that I wholeheartedly agree with all of this context of the importance, the context of governance. But yeah, this overarching importance of governance and all these things, to make sure that meaning carries consequentially across the firm. Um, Maybe an example for you of what the connection or context could be with this. I think you were talking with me earlier about connecting ARR with ICP fit or with other things.
Yeah.
So
So I think this connection definitely along the actual customer life cycle. So if a metric that connects ARR with ICP fit, with implementation readiness, as well as long-term expansion, that would help much more than these isolated metrics or KPIs that are typically reported on today.
mm. And can you imagine a day in your life in like a couple of months or a year or a quarter or two with more powerful contextual metrics? What might that look like for you, or what would your dream be there?
Oh, I mean, generally, a dream coming true, right? Not having to search numbers, fight about numbers, again and again, defining numbers. So I think in the future, I'll spend less time searching for insights and more time discussing them with the team. Metrics will hopefully come much richer in context, showing not just what has changed, but why it has changed and what decision it should inform. Um, I think if we get that right, dashboards stop being reporting tools and they become decision tools. So in the end, the goal isn't more metrics. We have enough of that. The goal is faster and shared understanding.
Beautiful. So, Henry, thank you so much for joining me today. Real pleasure, and it's always just so lovely to see and be a part of the way you work. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Twin Signals Metrics at Work. See you next episode.